I'm homeless. I don't have anything. The clothes I got today, I got yesterday. This was free.
But what are you guys coming down here for? Well, we heard about Skid Row. There's a lot of drugs down here. Yeah, there's a lot of trouble back here. Go back home. There's nothing down here. You know what I mean?
Oh, wow.
Down in the shadowed blocks of Skid Row, where the city's pulse quickens into a raw, unrelenting throb, hundreds of souls hunker down on cracked sidewalks each night, rough sleepers they call them now, curling tight under threadbare blankets, with no tent to shield them from the damp fog. It's a sight that hits you square in the gut, these makeshift camps stretching block after block, like forgotten veins in the heart of LA, littered with the ghosts of yesterday's meals and tomorrow's regrets. And yet here we are, smack in the middle of the City of Angels, where Hollywood's glamour lights up the hills and downtown skyscrapers gleam with the promise of endless reinvention.
Oh, wow.
Living down here, there's not a time where you can be relaxed. And you're always having to be on guard because you never know what's going to happen. I have not only females trying to fight with me or something, I have men trying to get at me. There is a lot of people who do get raped.
You gotta wonder, don't you? How does a place this flush with cash, this sprawling dream factory, let a corner like Skid Row fester as America's unhoused capital? The latest numbers from LASA, fresh as of October 25, paint a stark picture. 195 folks adrift across the county, a slim 4% dip from last year, but down in Skid Row, the unsheltered counts climbed 9% per that RAND report out in July. It's enough to make your blood run cold thinking about it. But here's the rub that keeps me up at nights. And it'll rile you too in a town drowning in billions for blockbusters and boardrooms. Why do we keep herding the broken into one ragged containment zone instead of scattering real hope across the map? Makes you pause, doesn't it? Could it be we're more comfy with the spectacle of suffering than the hard slog of fixing it? We'll wrestle with that shadow as we go, friend, because amid the despair, there's a flicker of fight that's purely stubbornly human. In the dim glow of sodium lamps on 6th Street, where the air hangs heavy with the sharp tang of unwashed despair, folks in Skid Row huddle against the chill, their breaths fogging like ghosts in the night. They wake up on bare concrete, on pieces of cardboard on a sidewalk that now feels more like a long, open dormitory than a street. On any given night, roughly 3,800 people are experiencing homelessness in and around Skid Row, and about 70% of them have no real shelter at all. More and more are what outreach workers call rough sleepers, people lying out in the open without a tent, a car, or even a tarp over their heads. In recent counts across Skid Row, Venice, Hollywood, this group has risen to around 42% of the unsheltered population, and Skid Row is where the crisis feels the sharpest. Devastatingly, CDC numbers from earlier this year show those fentanyl xylazine deaths spiking 35 times since 2018. These aren't statistics. They're neighbors gasping for air amid the filth where rats scurry bolder than stray dogs, and open sores fester without a drop of clean water in sight. Day-to-day life here is brutally simple. Find a place to rest. Try not to lose your belongings, and make it to the services before they close. Some folks line up at the Skid Row Care Campus, a new harm reduction hub that now sees close to 2,000 visits a day for showers, laundry meals, medical care, and overdose prevention. Others drift between missions, soup lines, and outreach vans handing out naloxone and clean supplies. From the outside, it can look like chaos. Up close, it's a fragile routine people cling to just to keep going. At the same time, local news stations have been running stories about a city program rescuing dogs from Skid Row, pulling dozens of neglected or starving animals out of encampments and into foster care. It's a compassionate effort, and honestly, I'm glad those animals are finally safe. But it also raises an uncomfortable question. How did we get to a point where it's easier to rescue someone's dog than to give that person a safe, stable place to sleep? And underneath all of this, there's another quiet controversy. Federal and local counts may be missing up to 1/3 of the people actually living on these streets, especially those without tents or vehicles. If the numbers are wrong, how much are we underbuilding, underfunding, and undercaring? When you walk down these blocks and see how many lives have been reduced to a backpack and a blanket, it's hard not to feel that we're managing a crisis we don't fully want to look at rather than solving one. We fully understand. You know, down in Skid Row, it's like the whole damn place is a powder keg of fentanyl, and that god-awful tranq xylazine, they call it, mixing up a storm that's tearing folks apart from the inside out. Just this past June, KTLA caught a guy named Josh Booker, showing off his finger all rotted and blistered after only 3 days of chasing that high. Said it came out of nowhere like the drug was gnawing at him while he slept on the sidewalk. On top of that, xylazines surged 200 to 76% in fentanyl-laced batches since 2019, per the CDC's latest provisional tally from September, leaving behind those flesh-eating wounds that no quick fix can mend. These poor folks aren't just users. They're survivors, scraping by, some even switching to smoking the stuff, because injecting's a death sentence waiting to happen. NPR reported back in March how the potency's dropped, some folks adapting with smaller hits, but hell, it's still a roulette wheel. Now layer on the mental health mess, and you see why it's such a vicious tangle. Rand's got it pegged at 70 to 80% of Skid Row's crowd wrestling untreated demons, schizophrenia, whispering lies, depression wrapping them in chains tighter than any tent flap. The county's own homeless initiative admits it's the epicenter for these crises, yet the bed-scarce staff stretched thinner than a worn-out blanket. You ever stop and wonder in a city flush with Hollywood glamour why we can't scrape together enough counselors to pull these people from the edge before they tumble? Furthermore, think about the cycle starts with the high chasing away. The pain spirals into sickness that kicks you to the curb. Then crime to survive, back to the needle for numb papers lost in the shuffle, so you can't even sign up for a roof. DEA's blunt about it. Predators prey on the mentally fragile down there, lacing the streets with this poison. And here's the kicker that gets under my skin. It's the unforgiving grind of no home, no hope that locks them in first. Harm reduction's a quiet mercy. Sure, naloxone kits saving lives, clean needles, staving off the worst infections. But without a solid 4 walls, it's just delaying the inevitable fall. Breaks your heart, doesn't it? These aren't statistics. They're neighbors, brothers, sisters caught in a whirlpool we built and keep feeding. The newest data from 2024-2025 reveals something many of us, especially those who have followed Skid Row homelessness for years, still struggle to accept the numbers. Here simply aren't going down, even as nearby areas like Venice and Hollywood show clear improvement. RAND's 2025 report highlighted a troubling reality. While the number of people with temporary shelter decreased in many neighborhoods, Skid Row did not follow that trend. In fact, the number of rough sleepers individuals lying directly on the pavement with no tent, no vehicle, no protection at all rose to roughly 42%. And when you walk through the blocks where Skid Row Lev unfolds every day, you can feel how painfully real those numbers are. More concerning, RAND found that traditional counting methods might miss up to 32% of people who sleep unsheltered outdoors. If that's true, is the entire picture of the Skid Row homeless camp far more severe than what official reports suggest. And if a significant portion of this population remains invisible, are our support systems, nonprofit outreach programs, and even budget allocations already misdirected from the start? Speaking with several frontline workers, I could hear the mix of exhaustion and determination in their voices. They explained that Skid Row isn't just battling a fentanyl crisis, it's also a place where issues related to mental health awareness are more overwhelming than ever. Some individuals are in such fragile psychological states that accessing shelters or medical services becomes nearly impossible. Coupled with the ongoing reality of Skid Row crime, the cycle of poverty, illness, addiction, and social disconnection only tightens further. So even though Los Angeles has pushed forward with supportive housing projects, care centers, and harm reduction models, Skid Row remains outside the orbit of improvement seen in other districts. And that leaves many people asking themselves, are the declines shown elsewhere truly signs of progress, or simply signs that the crisis is shifting around the city, while Skid Row continues to bear the heaviest weight? Skid Row stands alone in Los Angeles' homelessness crisis, and the more closely you look, the more you realize that this difference isn't accidental. Venice and Hollywood have both seen noticeable declines in their homeless populations, thanks to targeted strategies, motel vouchers, expanded outreach, and encampment resolutions paired with temporary housing. These areas, at least for now, benefit from an approach that tries to stop the slide before people fall any deeper. But Skid Row does not follow that trajectory. Here, the number of unhoused residents remains almost unchanged, and the rise of rough sleepers, as highlighted in the RAND 2025 report, has startled many observers. And when you walk through these streets, you understand why this is where Skid Row addicts cluster, because services are concentrated here, because the community feels familiar and because the ongoing fentanyl crisis in Los Angeles is pushing people to their breaking point. The city can open more supportive housing from the Weingart Tower to projects like 600 San Pedro, but is that truly enough when Skid Row remains the final stop for those who have nowhere else to go? And more importantly, how can we expect individuals battling Skid Row drug dependency to rebuild their lives when their foundation has never been stable in the first place? To be honest with you, the longer I study Skid Row, the more I feel that comparing it to Venice or Hollywood only highlights a harsher truth. Skid Row isn't just a neighborhood. It is the outcome of decades of channeling the city's hardest problems into one concentrated zone. And that's exactly why the debate continues. Is the city truly supporting its most vulnerable residents? Or has Skid Row become an unintended holding area for those who simply have nowhere else to go? The recent efforts to support people around Skid Row in 2024-2025 reveal something unmistakable. Even though the road ahead is painfully long, meaningful steps are being planted every single day. One of the most notable changes is the Skid Row Care Campus, where as many as 2,000 people come through daily to shower, wash their clothes, get a hot meal, receive medical tests, or simply sit for a moment in a space that feels safe. And you know, many people there have told me they haven't had anything like this in years. Yet despite all this progress, I still find myself asking, can one center truly carry the weight of a crisis this deep and widespread? At the same time, the city continues expanding long-term supportive housing, such as the newly opened Weingart Tower, offering more than 270 fully equipped units. In addition, the 600 San Pedro building is becoming a clear example of how Los Angeles wants to build stability, housing first services following right behind. But I'll be honest, no matter how important these developments are, the need outside is still so overwhelming that anyone witnessing it would feel a heaviness settle in their chest. And to see just how layered this crisis is, you only need to look at the Skid Row Dogs Rescue Program, where city workers have saved dozens of abandoned animals left in tents and makeshift shelters, a heartbreaking reflection of how fragile human life has become there. Still, as you might imagine, every effort runs directly into the wall of a long-standing healthcare system crisis. People experiencing homelessness need mental health treatment, medical care, detox support, and long-term stability. Yet hospitals are overcrowded, the workforce is stretched thin, and services move slower than the pace at which their lives are unraveling. This makes me ask another difficult question. How can we talk about hope when the very system meant to help them stand back up is struggling to stay upright itself? Even so, there is something profoundly admirable in the way nonprofit organizations, volunteers, and frontline workers continue to show up every day despite exhaustion and pressure. They remain one of the most essential parts of government social support, even though their capacity has limits too. But perhaps amid all the debates and disagreements, their steady presence is what keeps Skid Row from being completely swallowed by the shadows. By the time you reach the heart of Skid Row, one thing becomes impossible to ignore. People here are not just losing housing, they are slowly losing their place in the story. The rest of America tells about itself. Outreach workers will tell you they are seeing more women, more younger faces, more people who once had steady jobs and families. Some nights they walk block after block and meet folks who have fallen so far through the cracks that they no longer believe they belong anywhere else. Yet even in this harsh reality, there are moments of stubborn humanity. At the Skid Row Care Campus, which now sees roughly 2,000 visits a day, you'll hear soft thank yous over a hot meal, quiet jokes in the shower line, and people carefully folding the one clean shirt they own as if it were a small piece of dignity they refuse to surrender. A few blocks away in Weingart Tower, residents talk about simple victories sleeping through the night, taking their meds regularly, calling a sister or a son they haven't spoken to in years. Those are tiny steps, but here they feel enormous. Still, the numbers keep pressing in. New research shows that in Skid Row, the share of rough sleepers, people lying directly on the sidewalk without even a tent, has climbed to well over a third of the unsheltered population. That means more fragile bodies exposed to cold violence and constant exhaustion. And now the city has even launched a program to rescue dogs living in the encampments because so many animals are turning up sick, starved, or abandoned. It's a compassionate move, of course, but it also raises a hard question. If we need a special program to save the pets of Skid Row, what does that say about how far behind we are in saving the people themselves? So we are left with uncomfortable thoughts. Are we building enough Weingart Towers? Or are we mostly building ways to feel better about tolerating this crisis? When a wealthy city can raise billions for stadiums and mega projects, but still leaves thousands sleeping on concrete, what does that reveal about our real priorities as a country? Skid Row is still the place where Los Angeles has to look itself in the mirror. On just a few blocks, roughly 3,800 people live without stable housing, and most of them are unsheltered. New studies even say the official count may miss up to 1/3 of those sleeping directly on the sidewalk. At the very same time, Weingart Tower is opening its doors, and the Skid Row Care Campus is quietly serving around 2,000 visits a day. So what does it mean when the numbers of rough sleepers keep rising even as new buildings go up and ribbon cuttings make the news? And how long can a wealthy city live with this contradiction and still call it normal? To me, Skid Row Documentary 2025 isn't just a title. It's a question whether this neighborhood will remain a national warning or become proof that real change is still possible.